The invisible tax. You can make $90,000 a year and feel completely flat broke. And you can make the exact same $90,000 and feel utterly untouchable. Same company, same Friday direct deposit, same commute. On paper, a banking algorithm or a tax return looking at their lives could not tell them apart. Then, reality hits. Both of their cars break down in the exact same week. They take them to the exact same mechanic and both receive an identical bill, $1,400. Watch what happens next. Jake taps his card, doesn't even look at the terminal, and goes right back to scrolling on his phone. His heart rate doesn't skip a single beat. Logan reads the itemized estimate 3 times. He feels a physical drop in his stomach, steps out to the parking lot, and opens his banking app to play a dangerous game of financial Tetris, figuring out which utility bill or credit card payment he can push to next month just to stay afloat. Same income, same bill, 2 completely different human realities. What separates Jake from Logan isn't intelligence, it isn't discipline, and it is absolutely not their salary. It's a metric almost nobody accurately tracks: net worth. My name is JV, and on this channel, we untangle the hidden math behind money. If you're ready to break out of the treadmill, hit subscribe right now, because today, we are mapping the exact lines where your reality changes. There are 3 precise milestones on that net worth number line where life quietly stops feeling like an endless, exhausting treadmill and begins shifting into an entirely different game. Today, we are mapping the 3 net worth levels where your entire human experience of money rewires itself. And pay close attention, because level 3 does something to the human psychology that almost nobody sees coming. Millions of people scratch and claw their way to that final level, only to find out they are just as miserable as when they started. But before we can look at the top, we have to look at the math at the absolute bottom, because here is the framework that makes everything click. We live in a culture completely obsessed with income. How much do you make? What's the starting salary? What's the raise? But income is nothing more than water flowing through your open hands. Net worth is what is actually left in the bucket after the torrent flows through. And it turns out that bucket has 3 distinct lines painted on the inside. Jake had crossed the very first line. Logan hadn't. That is the entire secret behind the car repair. Level 1, $100,000. The escape velocity. $100,000. For some of you watching this right now, that number feels impossibly, painfully far away. For others, it sounds like a tiny rounding error. Stay with me, because regardless of where you sit, this is the most mathematically brutal and beautiful threshold on Earth. Charlie Munger, the legendary billionaire investor and Warren Buffett's late right-hand man, was once asked how to build true wealth. His response has been quoted thousands of times, but people rarely analyze the raw mechanics of it. He said, "The first $100,000 is a total nightmare, an absolute mountain to climb, but you have to do it. I don't care what you have to do. Find a way to get your hands on $100,000. After that, you can ease off the gas a little bit." Why would a man who dealt in billions fixate on a mere 6 figures? Because of a terrifying mathematical reality. The first 100 grand is the only stretch of your entire financial life where you have to do 100% of the heavy lifting. Let me show you the math. Let's say you are disciplined. You manage to save and invest exactly $10,000 a year, putting it into a diversified index fund yielding a standard 7% inflation-adjusted return. To get from absolute zero to your first $100,000 takes you roughly 7.8 years. Nearly 8 years of grinding. And during those 8 years, do you know what the stock market is doing to help you? Almost nothing. Out of that $100,000, roughly $78,000 of it is raw cash you personally had to earn, sacrifice, and refuse to spend. The market only contributed a tiny fraction in returns. It is slow. It feels unrewarding. It feels like standing still. But watch what happens next when compounding wakes up. Going from $100,000 to $200,000 doesn't take another 8 years. It takes about 5 years. From $200,000 to $300,000, under 4 years. And here is the kicker. Going from $500,000 to a full $1 million takes virtually the exact same amount of time it took you to scrape together that very first $100,000. Think about that. You generate 5 times the wealth in the exact same time window with the exact same 7% return. Why? Because at $100,000, your money quietly clocks in for its very first day of work. At a 7% yield, a $100,000 portfolio throws off $7,000 a year completely on its own. That is a full annual Roth IRA contribution generated while you sleep. You spent 8 years pushing the snowball up the hill. At $100,000, it finally crests the peak. But the real magic of level 1 isn't the math. It's what it does to your human brain. There is a famous psychological study conducted by researchers at Princeton and Harvard who set up shop in a mall. They took everyday people and presented them with a scenario. Your car needs a repair. For Group A, the repair costs $150. For Group B, it costs $1,500. While they were thinking about how to pay for that repair, the researchers gave them a standard fluid intelligence test to measure raw cognitive problem-solving ability. For high-income individuals, the price of the repair didn't change their test scores at all. But for lower-income individuals, people living paycheck to paycheck, just thinking about the $1,500 repair caused their cognitive performance to plummet. They lost the structural equivalent of 13 IQ points. The researchers noted that navigating acute financial scarcity imposes a cognitive load so heavy it is comparable to losing a full entire night of sleep. Think about Logan in that parking lot. He isn't less capable than Jake, but his brain is actively running a high-energy background program trying to solve a survival equation. He is permanently operating with financial mental static. The Federal Reserve recently reported that nearly 30% of American adults could not cover a surprise $500 expense using cash or savings. That isn't a structural lack of discipline. It's a structural lack of a cushion. Level 1 doesn't buy you a yacht. It buys you a quiet mind. It clears the static so you can actually think, plan, and protect your energy. Level 2, $500,000 to $1 million, the second salary. Once you cross that initial boundary, you enter the strangest, most psychologically volatile stretch of the entire wealth journey. The space between $500,000 and $1 million. The reason it feels so bizarre is because, for the first time in your life, the most productive worker in your household is no longer a human being. Let's re-examine the mechanics. At $500,000 invested, a standard 7% market return generates $35,000 a year. Let that sit with you. $35,000 appearing annually, materialized by absolutely nothing other than the money you already hold. For context, that is roughly what a median full-time worker takes home in many parts of the modern world. Your portfolio is now a living, breathing second earner in your house. It doesn't take sick days. It doesn't care about corporate politics. It doesn't hate Mondays. And if you hit a full $1 million, that same 7% average throws off $70,000 a year. That out-earns the individual median wage of the United States full-time workforce. This is the exact threshold where the phrase, work optional, stops being a cliché headline on a financial blog and starts becoming a tangible baseline on your horizon. How does level 2 change your day-to-day life? It shifts how you carry your shoulders. It is the midweek corporate meeting where an executive or a client makes a fundamentally toxic, unreasonable demand. And instead of feeling that familiar panic of, I have to swallow this to pay my mortgage, you feel a calm, quiet wave of realization. I could walk away from this room right now. You might choose not to walk out today, but knowing that you can completely rewires your leverage, what you tolerate, and how much of your core self-respect you are willing to trade for a paycheck. It also manifests in micro decisions. It's walking into a grocery store and realizing you haven't checked the price itemization on a single cart item in 2 years. It's booking the direct flight instead of the grueling 6-hour layover just to save $80. It's the home appliance completely dying and the entire catastrophe lasting exactly 4 minutes while you buy a replacement online. It isn't extreme luxury. It is the systematic removal of daily friction. But level 2 holds a devastating trap. It's called lifestyle inflation, the ultimate silent assassin of wealth. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. You secure the promotion, your income scales, and you immediately move into the premium apartment or lease the luxury vehicle. For roughly 6 months, it feels incredible. Then adaptation strikes. The premium leather seats just become your car. The thrill resets to baseline 0, but the massive overhead obligation remains permanent. This is exactly how people pulling in $300,000 a year still manage to live paycheck to paycheck. Their money never gets the opportunity to work its second job, because every spare dollar is drafted into funding a hyperinflated present lifestyle. Level 2 doesn't require you to earn more. It requires you to have the rare psychological nerve to leave the gap between what you make and what you spend wide open, allowing compound interest to walk right through. Level 3, $2,500,000 to $5 million. In the film The Gambler, a character lays out a brutal, unfiltered philosophy of financial freedom. He explains that the ultimate metric of money isn't luxury items. It's hitting a precise, safe number that grants you absolute leverage, a position where no institution, no boss, and no market crash can force you to do something against your will. His baseline target was $2.5 million, and mathematically, that number is incredibly profound. It anchors directly into one of the most rigorously tested concepts in financial planning, the 4% rule, birthed from the famous Trinity study. Scientists analyzed decades of market volatility to discover how much an individual can safely withdraw from a portfolio annually without ever running out of principal wealth. The baseline safety margin is 4%. This gives us a flawless mathematical shortcut. Take your absolute dream annual living costs and multiply them by 25. That is your sovereignty target. If your life costs $40,000 a year to run, your target is $1 million. If your lifestyle requires $100,000 a year to run without you ever lifting a finger again, you need exactly $2.5 million. If you scale that portfolio to $5 million, you can safely pull roughly $200,000 a year out of thin air indefinitely, placing you securely in the top single-digit percentage of global wealth. Out of over 130 million households in America, only a tiny fraction ever cross this line. But here is the dark twist waiting at level 3 that almost nobody prepares you for. For years, behavioral economists cited a legendary study claiming human happiness completely plateaus once you hit roughly $100,000 an annual salary. They argued that past that point, additional capital fails to shift your emotional baseline. Years later, researcher Matthew Killingsworth tracked real-time emotional tracking data from thousands of individuals and discovered something conflicting. Happiness actually kept climbing alongside wealth, with no visible ceiling. So who was telling the truth? The two opposing research camps actually sat down in a room together to reconcile the data, and what they discovered is the most vital takeaway of this entire video. For the vast majority of people, the 80% who are already generally content with themselves, more money does buy more happiness because it continuously removes limitations. But for the unhappiest 20% of the population, money relieves their emotional suffering only up until they hit about $100,000 a year, and then the graph flatlines into a dead end. Why? because their internal unhappiness was never caused by financial lack in the first place. And no amount of net worth can buy your way out of a psychological crisis that money didn't create. The people who reach level 3 and remain deeply miserable are the ones who viewed the number as the actual destination. The people who reach it and find true peace are those who realize that money can only purchase one thing of actual value: total custody over your own finite time, waking up without a mechanical alarm, saying an unconditional yes to the people you love, and a quiet, uncompromising no to the work you despise. Being physically present for moments you used to observe through phone screens. Level 1 bought you a quiet mind. Level 2 bought you strategic options. Level 3 buys back your life. The boring truth. If you are sitting there watching this right now, looking at your bank account and feeling discouraged because you aren't even close to level 1 yet, stop. The fact that these milestones are rare isn't a reason to feel left behind. It is the exact reason they are worth pursuing in the first place. The barrier to entry to a different life isn't infinite billionaire capital. It's a cushion, then a choice, then your time back. And remember how this equation began. The absolute hardest, slowest, most frustrating phase of the entire game is the journey to that very first $100,000. It is the phase where you do all the work and the numbers look small. It's exactly where 90% of people give up and pull the plug, right before the snowball has the chance to turn over. You don't need to be a genius to cross these lines. You just have to be incredibly stubborn. Your money over the next decade is either going to work for you the way it does for Jake, or you are going to spend your life working around the lack of it the way Logan does. Choose your level. Not the fantasy one at the end of the line, just the very next one within your reach. If this perspective shifted how you see the number in your account, drop a comment below and tell me exactly which level you are actively climbing toward right now. I read every single one. And if you want to see the precise tactical roadmap to cross the level 1 threshold as fast as possible, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. I'll see you there.